And how will the Labour Party, if got re-elected under Gordon Brown, reduce the deficit?
Well, we've set out how we're going to do it, and in actually much more detail than Paul suggests. And I could have brought with me, but it's available on the website, the budget book, which was published just over 6 weeks ago, which is about that thick, which has got huge detail for what's going on this year, financial year, which includes, let me say, as I'm in my own department, I've been cutting some hundreds of millions of pounds, and you can't make cuts painlessly. Defence solicitors and barristers are facing a 15% cut in their advocacy fees. Now, I think they can afford it, but that's what happens when you cut. There are no you can save a little bit on paper clips and taxes, but it's a tiny amount, or MPs or ministers' salaries, but it's a drop in the ocean. So be in no doubt that these cuts will be painful, and we will make them, and already making them. And we also set out the big numbers for getting the deficit down. But can I just pick up a point which was explicit in both what Michael and Paul said about us overextending ourselves. We haven't overextended ourselves. What we've sought to do is to invest in schools and colleges, police stations, the National Health Service, to deal with some many, many years, frankly, of neglect before. Now, although I hear Mr. Cameron, especially, saying nationally he thinks we spent too much, I never ever heard him say this at the time. And I never ever heard a Conservative councillor, when I've helped to get money into the town, saying to me, we don't want that money. Indeed, I've been very happily working in cooperation with the local council, but every time I've gone off to get money, the councillor said, thanks very much, and couldn't we have a bit more? So you can't retrospectively say we shouldn't have had the money. The money has not been spent on air. It's been spent on new homes in Blackburn, it's been spent on a new hospital in Blackburn, spent on a university centre, and so on. Yes, there'll be less building for the future, but let us be clear about this. This is not waste, it's investment, which has made a phenomenal difference to people's lives here in this town.
Thank you, Jack. Michael.
Just on that point, I'd just like to pick up on what Jack was saying about spending cuts and identifying them, and you said they're identified within the budget. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, there's 87% of Labour spending cuts have not been identified yet, and that's the largest proportion of any party. The other issue you raised is about the hospitals and the schools in Blackburn, fabulous as they are, but can you explain how we're going to pay back the borrowing on the hospital and the borrowing on the Building Skills for the Future programme?
Michael, yes, I can. We pay it back as part of public spending, and so far as the private finance initiative is concerned, this was something for which the Conservative government used to take credit because they got it going. Good for them. They then persuaded us that it was a good idea.
So something you got in common?
Yeah, so it's something we've got in common. So, and even if we'd financed, in many, I understand people's concerns that why didn't we finance these things in the traditional way. But to take the hospital, you either borrow the money as a package deal from the developer and pay them a rent, or you borrow the money from the banks and pay the banks the interest. It comes down effectively to the same thing. There are technical reasons why the PFI sometimes been appropriate. And I say it was what are they? Yes. What they are is that you get certainty about the total costs, and particularly you lock in the developers and the builders into the future maintenance of the building. So, for example, with PFIs on prisons, which the Conservatives pioneered and I've carried on with some prison building, you actually end up on the whole with cheaper unit costs. So that's the value of it. Of course, all the costs are factored in to the budgets for this year and the wider budgets for the 3 future years. And of course they'll be paid back, and they are included in our deficit reduction plan. The other thing, if I may, a point I just make is this. Already we are saving money that would otherwise be spent because unemployment has risen far less than any of us anticipated. So £4 billion has been saved from what was going to have to be spent on unemployment benefit. I don't mind mentioning, I was in Morrison's yesterday talking to the management, talking to shoppers, and they are now seeing a significant increase in purchases per basket because they feel that we're coming out of the recession.
Okay. Just before I bring you in, Paul, the live studio number is 01254 277 370. We'll take just one more point from Paul and Bushra, and then we'll come to the audience. Paul, I mean, the point is the Institute for Fiscal Studies quite clearly says that all 3 major parties have black holes within their budget plans.
Yeah. We have black hole, we don't deny it. That report also said, of all the parties, the Liberal Democrats were the most honest.
So you're the
and had
lesser
the
of
most
the two
work
evils.
We were the lesser. We're trying to be as open and honest. The reality is, the country is in a mess, and people, the man on the street is going to have to pay either with his job or with extra taxes. That's the reality, and it depends on which party you listen to the most. But
So
it
the
has to
Liberal
be paid
Democrats are going to
somehow.
increase tax.
We're looking at a complete radical overhaul of the whole tax system, and we're looking at fairer taxes for all. We believe that the common person on the street is paying a bigger contribution of his wages than someone who is more well off. So looking at things like the mansion tax, local income tax eventually, but also you've got the stealth taxes like VAT. If we all put a gallon of petrol in our car, it's a stealth tax. If you're only earning £100, it's going to hit you more than it's going to hit someone paying £100,000.
Paul, Bushra?
Well,
you, unlike the parties, you're an independent voice. I mean, looking out from outside, how would, if you got elected to Parliament, how would you work in Parliament to reduce the deficit?
Well, I would obviously lobby people from across the parties on issues which are appropriate. But what I find as an individual and as a member of the public is that they talk about cuts and they talk about deficits and recession, and yet I keep seeing big companies like even the Law Society and Legal Aid Boards and other companies that keep changing their names, and every time they change their name or anything, they have to change they actually cost millions of pounds in these things. And I also see other things happening which I see as a waste of public funds. Unemployment was caused because when Labour came in, their policy was marketing. Everything big was the answer. And obviously when companies get very big, I know that recession has hit them as well, but the small businesses were very much ignored. And I think that has led a lot to local unemployment, and that is also the answer to getting more jobs.
Okay, let's take a couple of points. The gentleman at the back.
My question is to Jackson. I think every government have their priorities, and if we see positively and obviously, we can see the last 13 years Labour priority is not to improve business or not to contact with the business peoples. So Labour government, what last 13 years doing is to getting oils, to winning wars against 3 countries. I think if you see closely Labour parliaments, the experts peoples are to getting oil things.
Okay.
And when, after 13 years when they're going away, look at the oil prices. Look, no businessman understand how to improve their business. They have no strategy from the governments. So it means they don't have a specialized people in their parliament to improve economy and business. What they have a war planners, how to get oils into that country.
We will come back to foreign policy later on in the show. Okay, Jack, to you, just answer that question.
Well, what the gentleman is saying, we haven't had a business strategy, and I'm sorry, sir, that's not correct. We've seen a vast expansion of new businesses, including small and medium-sized businesses, huge increase in support for them. In this area, the establishment of regional development agencies and much else besides, and there's a fantastic expansion of support for businesses. And compare that with the situation in the Asian communities. Paul refers to the Thatcher period, and he's absolutely right to do so. When all the factories closed in the early 80s, half the Asian men lost their jobs through no fault of their own, and they remained out of work for years and years and years. That was the reality then. It's not the reality now, and that's the truth of it. And as for the Conservatives, what they're proposing to do, which would seriously damage business in this area, large and small, is to wind up the regional development agencies, and alongside that, change corporation tax by cutting the basic rate of corporation tax but eliminating all the relief for manufacturing. They would help the banks and harm manufacturing. Okay, it's time for a break. We'll come back after the break and we'll take a few more questions. It's time for a break. Please do join us on the other side of this.